Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of iDrive Daily. Today we're going to replace the stock C5 shifter with the new short throw from MGW. Afterwards, we're going to talk a little bit what it's like to have owned and driven a short throw for over a month. Step 1 to getting the MGW installed is to remove the center console. So we'll put the car in neutral. To remove the shift knob, we'll use a small screwdriver to pry up the gear pattern cover. Next, using two large flat blade screwdrivers, we'll use them to remove the demon key. We'll just pry from both sides, giving a little bit of pressure, and it'll eventually slowly lift out. Once the key is out, we can easily screw the knob off. The boot is easily removed by just squeezing the top and pulling up. It should pop out. We'll next remove the two screws in the ashtray area and the third one behind the air sensor. There are 3 total screws up front. Next, we'll remove the nuts from the mounting bolts at the back of the center console. You'll also pop open the active handling portion of the console. You don't need to remove all the connections underneath, but I honestly found it to be easier, giving me a little bit more room to work. You'll find 2 nuts in here as well, and we'll be removing them. At this point, you can pull the back half of the console out. Be careful, you need to reach in and unplug the center connector from the gas cap button. It's in a real tight spot, but once you get it out, you can remove the back half of the console completely. Once the center console is out of the way, we can remove the boot cover from the shifter. It's just 4 10mm nuts holding it down. We'll then remove the shifter as well. Remove the 4 bolts and it should easily pull up and remove. With the top portion of the shifter gone, we need to remove the lower box. We'll find some T40 hex nuts at this point, so you'll need to remove the 2 hex bolts holding the lower box on, as well as the 1 hex nut locking the linkage rod to the transmission. I found these to be on pretty tight, so you'll have to put some force behind them. Once they are off, you should be able to gently slide the lower box from the transmission. The linkage rod should come with it. Once the lower box is out, we'll need the linkage rod, so we'll undo the plastic piece by unscrewing the Phillips head screws and putting the plastic pieces off to the side. Once that is done, the linkage rod should easily slide out. Make sure the shaft at the front and back of the pivot cup is smooth. Place the new bushings on the front and back and orient the linkage rod in such a way that the larger notch is facing the rear of the car when the bolt holes for the lower box are facing the passenger side. Place the top half on, and before bolting it down with the lock screws, make sure the linkage rod removes freely and the bushings are seated properly. Make sure to tighten the screws firmly and verify the rod continues to move freely. We'll take the alignment tool and place it over the top of the lower box. This will force the linkage rod to be perfectly center. All we need to do is bolt it onto the lower box with the Allen wrench. This will remain on until the lower box is installed in the car. With the included Dynamat, we'll trim it into 2 4-inch by 5-inch pieces. Remove the adhesive backing, and with the 4-inch width, you'll slide it in between the 2 mounting posts and wrap it around over the torque tube. It should spill over onto the top of a little notch on the tube facing the driver's side. Don't bring it too far over to the side, or you'll find that the second piece of Dynamat doesn't fit very well. With the second, we'll place the 5-inch width down and wrap it underneath the torque tube facing the driver's side. Do not let the Dynamat overlap the first piece on the top of the notch, or it will be too thick for the lower box to fit properly. With the rectangular heat barrier sheet, place it on the driver's side wall and press it down flat. You'll want it around a 1/2 inch below the surface line. Using the second rectangular piece with the sticky part facing the passenger side, you'll want to slide it down and wrap it around the torque tube. This was by far the most difficult piece to work with. You'll want to make it flush with the notch on the torque tube, but don't want it to flap over the top. The T-shaped piece will then fit in between the mounting posts. The thin portion will go between the mounting holes, and the wide part should just about cover the notch on the torque tube. Grab the rod going back to the transmission and slide the linkage rod in. We'll place some Loctite on the threads of the bolt going back to the transmission. For me, I was lucky and it went in right the first time, but you might need to adjust slightly to make sure everything goes in correctly. Tighten the bolt. Once the lower box is connected to the transmission, it is safe to remove the alignment tool. Now we can mount the box to the torque tube. We'll take the original OEM T40 bolts and screw them down tight. At this point, you want to remove the alignment tool. Once off, take the linkage cup and slide it fully forward. Looking down, you should be able to see a small gap between the cup and the front bushing. Then do the same, sliding it backwards into 4th gear. Assure that there is a small gap in the back as well. This needs to be the case to ensure that the transmission is fully engaging into gear. Next, take the silicone gasket, place it over the lower box, and with the pivot cup in neutral, place the shifter down so that the pivot ball goes into the cup and the bolts line up. The MGW logo should be facing the driver's side. Take the hex bolts provided and bolt the shifter down into the lower box. Do this in a diagonal pattern to ensure that it goes down flat. You should begin to see the silicone gasket compress. Once they are tight, take the Allen wrench provided and use them to tighten the locking screws in the front and back of the shifter. Alright, so obviously what I've done so far has been overdubbed. I generally like doing things that way because it allows me to make sure everything is explained a little bit better and a little bit more freedom when it comes to editing. However, this kind of part here, where we actually have to modify the cover that goes over the shifter itself, I do want to do live, I guess, for better lack of a better word. Anyway, so I'm going to use brand new razor blades. I want these as sharp as possible. I'm going to use single-edged razor blades here. So I'm going to go ahead and open these up. Now, there is a link to the MGW version of this very exact process if you want to see someone else do it as well, or you just don't like the sound of my voice, whatever reason, the MGW is linked as well. So what you want to do is, there's a double lip here. There's the outer rim here, the bigger lip, and then it drops down a level and goes into the second rim. You actually want to remove the second rim all the way around and out. To do so, what you're going to do is you're going to take the blade, you're going to lie it flat against that rim, push in, and slowly cut all the way around. If you remove any more, you run the risk of running a whole lot of road noise. It doesn't fit over the MGW as well. Granted, this upper level is going to be a little bit of a tighter fit, but it's going to prevent a lot of that road noise people tend to dislike. So let's go ahead and start cutting. And there you go. Now, if you do get it perfectly right on the seam, as I did around probably after about 3/4 of cutting, it will slide super easy. Otherwise, I've found that I had to pull the blade out just a little bit and apply a little bit of inward pressure as I was moving along. I would suggest taking slow cuts. I did a little bit at a time as I kind of moved around. If you go fast, you run the risk of cutting too much or just making it look kind of crappy. Granted, is this the perfect flat, I want it all the way around, or they suggest? Nope, it definitely isn't, but I think it's going to work, and let's go ahead and put it back in. We'll take our trimmed boot and tuck it carefully under the boot of the MGW shifter. I highly suggest you start on the driver's side, as it is a very tight fit and difficult to get into place. We'll work it all the way around until it looks like 3 continuous bellows all the way around the boot. We'll then put the 4 hex nuts on the boot and lock them down. Finally, taking our shaft and removing the hex nuts and washer, we'll put the hex nut back on, followed by the lock washer and the flat washer. We'll then screw it into the vibration dampener. Once down, we can tighten the jam nut. From there, it's just a matter of putting the center console back together. Hey Bedheads, so I've had this shifter for about a month, and before I review it real quick, I do want to mention the difficulty of install. It really isn't that bad. There are a ton of videos. As you've seen, there were links scattered throughout this video, and there's stuff down in the comments if you're not quite sure, you just want to watch additional information. putting this together really isn't a bad process at all. I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, for someone who doesn't have a ton of mechanical experience, I would put it at about a 5. I knew how to take apart the interior already. I've done that once before. It's the matter of putting the lower box on and the upper box and all that stuff was new to me, but it really wasn't a difficult process. It took me somewhere between 3 to 4.5 hours. Again, you know, moving cameras, things like that, added a little bit of time. You should be able to do this in anywhere from 2 to 3 hours if you're taking your time, which I do suggest because rushing things usually doesn't end well. So after about a month of having it, how do I like this? Well, I'm going to be honest. It should have come with the car in the first place. I mean, this is phenomenal compared to the stock shifter. I'm all for one. I've been one. I understand people who want to keep their car stock, but this, oh man, you are missing out if you don't put something like this in, especially the MGW. I can't speak for the others, but the MGW has just been phenomenal. So yes, everything is tighter. All the gears are closer together. You can shift faster. In the first few days, I had to retrain my leg on the clutch because I didn't realize how much of it was actually timed to my gear shifting. But yeah, it is, and you'll learn that pretty quickly that it is. I've now kind of reprogrammed myself to understand how far the clutch needs to go down to disengage so that I can shift. You just realize how much footwork you are missing because of the original shifter. Daily driving it, I've seen people complain about it, how difficult it is to move in and out of gear. I don't find that. Now, I will say in the first few days it is a shock, but putting about 13,000 miles a year on this car means I've probably put around 1,000 miles on average in this assembly already. So everything has kind of started to wear in and everything is moving smoothly. The only thing I'm still wonky with is going from 4th to 5th, but when I think about it, I was kind of wonky doing that on the original. I don't know why. That's just my weakness. If you're racing me, wait for me to get to 4th gear and you'll know I'll be a little slower on the shift going into 5th. But overall, I've been really happy with this, and like I said, this should have come with the car. Daily driving it has not been a pain. I know some people do complain about it, but it hasn't bothered me yet. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to say about it. I'm sure there is, and I'm sure I'm missing it. Yeah, I don't think so. I do highly suggest this, the MGW shifter. It matches the car more than the OEM shifter. It really does. The box, the tightness of the gears and everything, of the shifting and everything, just really matches the sports car feel better than the OEM ever could. So I do highly suggest it. I know it's going to cost you about $400, but it is well worth the money. Really well worth the money. I can't speak praises high enough for it. I love it. So the only thing left to complete this assembly on the interior is to install the new leather from Redline Goods. I'm going to be doing that in the next few weeks. It's time to clean out the basement. I got exhaust parts laying everywhere, so I'm going to be putting on exhaust in a few weeks. If you like this content, please consider subscribing and joining me on the continued journey of my C5 Corvette. Thanks, guys, and have a great day.